auditor wish list. What are the things that you would have? And when the genie gives you 3 wishes, it's like over the next few years, what would you like to see change? I think that that'd be super helpful for I think for the rest of us to know. It's because like we're always on the other side. I've never been an auditor, so I do not pretend to know what kind of perspective auditors have. So I'd love to hear kind of like your thoughts on what should change.
Right. Yeah, great question. I was just thinking I should go on podcasts more often. I never get asked this during my workday. This is what I'm asking other people, right?
Hello, everyone. Nick Moy here. I'm Scrud Automation's Chief Security Officer, and we have with us today Beau Butaud. Did I say that right?
Almost. Yeah, I say it Butaud, but
Okay.
That's a lot better than some that I've got.
Next time. And he's a risk and compliance manager at Moss Adams, and he's been in the risk and compliance space for 5 years, and he's based out of here in Seattle. And thank you for joining us today, Beau. And we're looking forward.
Thank you.
Looking forward to chatting with you. We're Risk Wrestlers is about really understanding, getting people's stories for the risk and compliance and security space. There's many different folks from different backgrounds, and we really think it's always fun and super interesting to kind of like learn more about people and their backgrounds who are in the space. And it's not every day you get an auditor to come and share more about that.
Well, yeah, it's not every day you get someone who's curious to talk to an auditor. So usually we're the people knocking on the door and being asked to go away. So this is nice. This is a nice change.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can't imagine why would people not want to talk to auditors? What is that?
Yeah.
What is that? What is that all about? It's so weird. I mean,
Right.
So on that note, Beau, I mean, how did you give us a little bit of backstory there? How did you get into this, the very illustrious space?
Yes, the much desired space of the IT auditor. I studied accounting in college because I thought that would be a good way to get a job, and it was. And I got a job with a local Seattle accounting firm doing financial statement audits. And I really liked that. I did that for a year or two. And then the opportunity came up with that firm to, they were launching their own, they called it IT risk team. And they needed fresh young staff to raise their hand and join. And for me, it seemed like a really good opportunity. The tech industry as a whole, of course, is growing pretty quickly, was growing and is growing pretty quickly relative to the more stable financial clients that we would have for an accounting firm. And so it seemed like a really good opportunity. And I tried it out once or twice and I really liked it. I liked auditing finances, but I liked auditing tech even more. It seemed to make more sense to me. A financial statement audit was like you're auditing against all these principles, and the principles may or may not make sense. But like with IT security, at least you're trying to keep things safe, and I think that's always made more sense to me, just inherently. So yeah, switched tracks about 6 years ago there, and have been doing that ever since, and really enjoying it.
I think some of us forget who have been in the space for a long time that it's all relative, right? It's like going from financial auditing to IT risk compliance, must have been like a refreshing shift for you. And then I think those of us who've, been in the security and compliance space, it just kind of feels like, oh, it's been this way for too long, and it doesn't make sense. But I guess that's because they haven't had to deal with it.
Right. No, certainly don't. Or the tax rules. Not that I work much in those, but yeah, someone should do a report to objectively compare, how cumbersome GAAP is versus like, I don't know, a NIST standard or something like that, and see who has it worse.
Yeah, definitely anyone auditing to GAAP, that's just I've seen those. What is it? The management notes on the audited financial statements that are almost as long as the financial statements. Yeah, they're real. We have all our favorite non-GAAP measurements. Yeah, I mean, I think that's super interesting too. I mean, are there things, from your point of view that, maybe people should be, thinking about differently in the IT risk compliance space that, or maybe there's kind of like room for improvement?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think when we were chatting about leading up to this or in weeks past is, I think one of the biggest problems in compliance that people like to complain a lot about is people are using these reports and approaching these reports, whether it's SOC 2, what I do, or you name it, compliance report out there, right? As a check in the box, when really it's like, you have to remember it's a report. It's like, this is a person who's making a set of claims about a set of things, systems, and then there's another person, an auditor, who's coming in and doing tests against those. But just because you have your SOC 2 report, that means nothing inherently. What matters is, why are you getting your compliance report, and did the tests that were done against those statements fulfill the purpose they're going for? Just clearly defining why you're doing this from the very beginning, defining the scope of the report that's under audit, and then ensuring you stay true to those inherent principles throughout the whole thing is, it's not easy to do. You have to keep asking those why questions, but I think that's one of the most important things people could do right now to significantly improve their compliance programs.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally appreciate your perspective on that, because it's kind of like people are like, some people probably just assume, they're like, well, I'm supposed to do it. I have to do it. I need to do it. Other people are doing it. Then they probably, I'm sure there are a number of people, maybe one person knew why they were doing it, and everyone else was kind of like, what is this for?
Right.
Who is this for? How is this going to help our business? Is it going to help our business? I would hope most people are asking themselves those questions. It's when it comes to doing the compliance reports, what would you say?
Yeah, I was just talking to a number of clients over the past several months where, because we'll often ask at the end of a report, or also at the beginning of the audit process, like, how is this report being received by the people who are asking for it? And we'll get some really interesting answers, right? Sometimes people won't know why they're getting this report. And so that'll be a really good discussion, right? Like, do you need this? Should it be significantly different? But yeah, it's like you said, like, people hear from someone else, okay, yeah, I need this SOC 2, need this other compliance report. And then you go get it, but maybe you don't. Maybe it needs to look significantly different. And one good example of that, from these clients I've interviewed recently, there is from vendors that will initially, or let's say future customers that they are trying to work with, right? Prospects that initially require the SOC 2 and ISO 27001 and all this other stuff. I don't think people realize that you can push back on that. You can say, we have something else, like, and you don't need that, and here's why, that can be a conversation. I think companies often look at those conversations like, we really want this prospect, let's get them everything they want. But if you, again, take a step back and say, what is it they are after? Can we satisfy that currently, or do we need this report? I think that goes a long ways. And then say you do need the SOC report, that's going to help you accurately scope it in and do it for only what you need, right?
You almost wish everyone who was thinking about doing it was asked that question.
Right.
Just kind of like, hey, right before you do this, do you know why you're doing it? You know, what it's for and who it's for, and that maybe you should go back and ask your prospect. It's like, hey, how can we really help you? What are you really looking for?
Totally.
And I hope for that person going through that SOC 2 compliance effort that's actually what kind of their business needs or what their customers need. I was just thinking, it's like you definitely have more than a passing interest in this. You've been doing this for 5+ years. Like, what keeps you in the space? I loved your LinkedIn headline, by the way. I'll be honest. It's like, when I saw that, I was like, well, I have to talk to this guy. And because Beau's LinkedIn headline, when he messaged me, first thing I saw was like, it said SOC 2 that slaps, and I was like, well, that's some pretty good SOC 2. I was like, okay, yeah, you'll have to tell us more about that.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think that's been helpful because it's never fun getting random messages on LinkedIn. So I was kind of surprised you answered, but glad to know the headline helps with that. But yeah, because I've certainly considered, to me, I don't enjoy doing things that check in the box, right? Like if a company's doing something just because they have to, which is the case a lot of the times. Like I would rather do something where somebody really sees the value in it, right? So I have definitely considered jumping ship and doing something on the building a product of some kind, right? That sounds pretty interesting. So what has kept me in this? I think the really cool thing about it is I'm learning so much as an auditor, especially with the clientele that I'm working with now are probably call them small to mid-size companies. And so I'm not on probably like some people in the big 4 accounting firms are used to. I'm not working 1 or 2 or 3 clients all year. I probably am switching to a new project every other week. And so I really enjoy, you get a really good high-level overview of what they do and what's important to them and how they protect their data and how they run their basic operations in various areas of a different company every 2 weeks. So I really enjoy just learning about the company. The other thing is, of course, as an IT auditor, we have to sort of be able to understand the technology that we're testing, right? Hopefully we have a good basic understanding of it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, maybe you had different experiences with auditors, but so yeah, it's also learning and keeping up with the technology, right? Like when containers started to be more of a thing, we had to ask, okay, well, what's the risk of using containers or just introducing new technologies in general? And how do we audit that? So you have to do a little bit of a deep dive into certain things, which I enjoy as well. So yeah, always learning. That's definitely a big part of it. I've enjoyed that.
That's super. I totally didn't even think about as technology is constantly changing. Have there been, in the last couple of years, what are some interesting changes, I guess, in how companies are using technology that have really, maybe, I guess, required you and, auditors to have to think about it differently, do something different, or...
Right. Yeah, great question. I think a few examples spring to mind. This is one that's not current. It's more like over the last, say, 10 years. But when it comes to change management controls, right, almost the whole approach has totally changed if you're embracing a more modern tech stack and agile processes. I know there's a lot of companies out there that are still like waterfall, and that's actually a very modern approach and works well for them. But a lot of companies are going more agile and just want to be able to push lots of changes frequently out to production, right? And so for, I guess, the approach to security there, as I'm sure you're aware, has changed pretty radically. Like it used to be about, okay, we'll give the developers access to source code repository, and then we'll give the IT team or deployment team, now it's DevOps, like one of these other teams access to actually the production servers. The development team builds it, sends it over, and then deploy team deploys it. And as auditors, that was really easy, I think, because we just came in and said, do any of your developers have access to production servers? Give us some evidence of that. Nope. Okay, great. We compare two lists and we're happy. But now it's like more built into the tool and the workflow, right? Like maybe a developer does have access to build something and push it into production same day. All they need is the right review or testing framework, or to run it through a build pipeline, right? And so, yeah, that's forced us to take a step back and say, okay, what do we really care about happening in between development and deploy? And I think that differs for each product, but that made for an interesting challenge. One of the ones that's interesting to me, but I haven't seen a lot of development on lately, or just like is new, right? Like everyone's talking about AI right now. And I've heard a lot of talk about like what might be the impact on audits. I haven't seen that really actually impacting the way audits are going right now. So I'm curious to see how that unfolds.
Yeah. No, I mean, it would be weird, who doesn't bring it up? So it would be a lie if you said no one brought it up. I mean, right. I hadn't thought about the change management piece. Yeah, because I remember there were companies that would have these change advisory boards, and it would be a very very rigid process. Like you said, there's a release or deployment team or a DevOps team. They're the only ones with access to production, and everyone else just has access to the source code and the test environments. Now everything's like, so many companies are continuous deploy, just because of the pressure to get, I everything changes out in the product
Mm.
so quickly. I mean, do you have this is a fun one. I was just thinking as you were talking about those changes, but what changes would you like? Auditor wish lists. What are the things, that you would have? And, when the genie gives you three wishes, it's like over the next, few years, what would you like to see change? Because I think that, that'd be super helpful I think for the rest of us to know. It's because like we're always on the other side. I've never been an auditor, so I, do not pretend to know what, kind of perspective auditors have. So, I'd love to hear kind of like your thoughts on, what should change.
Right. Yeah. Great question. I was just thinking I should go on podcasts more often. How I never get asked this during my workday. This is what I'm asking other people, right? So no, it's nice. But I think kind of along the lines of our initial discussion. Number one would be companies taking their basically like, I framed it in project scope, but I think it's really just taking more ownership of their compliance program. We were chatting earlier too about kind of the shared responsibility between the auditor and the auditee, which is weird, and there's a lot of gray there. But I think by far the default that I've seen is companies will default that responsibility to the auditor. And that probably happens for a number of reasons. I think the auditor is often the expert about the compliance framework in question. Also, the company is the one paying the auditor oftentimes. And so you have that kind of natural client service relationship of we want to do as much as possible for you, add value. But so it goes both ways. I think the company initially needs to take more responsibility for their framework. And so that looks like we talked about, identifying why you even need this report, allowing that to shape your project scope and your system boundaries and whatnot, identifying who are your end users. And then out of that, developing your control framework or whatever you call them, identifying which requirements are in scope. And then managing that on an ongoing basis, right? Like probably looks like assigning control owners to all of those controls and putting systems in place so that they are held accountable to that on a regular basis. If companies did that, it would make the audit process so much easier. But like I said, it goes both ways. I think we as the auditors also we tend to push into that role too much, I think, and we need to, on the other hand, remind the client, okay, just ask the open-ended question, what is your control around this area? What do you do in this area? And just let them, if they're struggling, let them struggle to both maintain that independence, and because we don't know their system, we can't build it better than they can. So allowing them to do what they do best there. That was like one or three things.
It's like people need to have a point of view. It was like, it's your compliance program. What do you want to do? It's your company, it's your business, it's your product. You should have a point of view. I mean, I think that's true just for a lot of things. It's like, people should just own it, feel some ownership and accountability. I guess when you're talking to an auditor, though, you really don't want to own anything. You're like, actually, I own nothing. I'm accountable for nothing. I'm not the owner of anything. I'm the owner of no things. That guy over there is the owner. You should go talk to him.
Right. And I guess you probably feel the exact same pain in the security world, right? Where you're trying to get business owners to take accountability for their areas.
Yes. Yeah, no, totally. That, and I was just thinking an oddity sounds like a cousin of a manatee. That
That's
was
great.
what,
I've never considered that for a mascot before, but
yeah, I was like an oddity sounds like a distant cousin, maybe the same genus or phylum or kingdom. I don't know. I'm not a biology major, so I can't tell you. But yeah, no, I mean in security, it's very much, I guess, not dissimilar, where it's like security leaders are responsible for managing a security program. There are controls that are in place to manage risk to the company, to mitigate risk for data loss, to mitigate risk for unauthorized access, to mitigate risk for all kinds of things. And those control owners are not always just going to be the security team. The security team doesn't do everything inside any company. That same DevOps team that is responsible for managing the Terraform instance and the infrastructure as code, they have a point of view. And I think similar to an auditor experience where it's like, you tell me if I'm wrong, security professionals will go work with those control owners and they'll play this game where it's like, hey, here's what we're trying to do. How do you think we should build this control? What do you think is a better way to do it? And then the answer will be, what do you think is a better way to do it?
Yeah.
And then we'll just play this but you manage this entire process end to end for the company. So I'm going to ask you, and I'm the security person. And then your answer is to ask me what I think and have me tell you. And then most of the time, especially in big companies, what happens is you give them some thoughts and recommendations. And then they're like, well, that's not going to work. So we're not going to do it. It's like, of course, I mean, I don't know. I'm not the owner of your thing. You own it.
Right.
I mean, that's what you said. I find it convenient when people own it when they want to, and then they don't when they don't want to.
Yep.
They don't own it. They don't own anything when they're being audited. But when they're not being audited, they're like, I'm in charge of everything.
What have you found to be helpful there? Like in actually getting more buy-in for those people?
Yeah, I mean, outside of bribing them. No, I mean, I think you really just
tried that.
I've tried that. You really have to take time to understand. I mean, this happens a lot. I guess security people are distant cousins of auditors. Understand that part of the business. Understand that person's business problem that they're there to solve. Whether they're a DevOps team, a dev team, a product management team, a finance team. Take time to understand their part of the business. Like, what are they doing? How are they doing it? What are they worried about? It's easy as a security professional to just be like, everyone should spend 24 hours a day worried about data breaches. You owe it to the company to worry about data breaches all the time. And it's just not realistic. So, I think what's worked best for me was taking time to understand my peers and their counterparts. It's kind of like, hey, for your part of the company, what are you trying to do? What are you accountable for? And then maybe based on that, I'll be in a better position to understand, okay, this person cares about X, Y, and Z. I can think about my suggestions, recommendations. I can think about the context I could help them with based on their reality. Because I don't know it, right? And I'm not going to. Rookie mistake a lot of security people make is just going in and just, barging through the door and just like, hey, you need to do all these things. You're the control owner. You're a bad person. You're not protecting the company. We're going to get breached. So, it's your fault. It's just blame all day. At least as an auditor, I guess you don't do that. You just tell people they're non-compliant.
Well, yeah, and it's the same thing. I really appreciate that stance though, because yeah, we'll do the same thing, right? We'll come in and say like, you're the assigned control owner here, uh, and our evidence isn't here, and you don't know what you're talking about, kind of like, we won't say that, but the questions we ask. But yeah, what if we started, like you said, from like, what do you do? Uh, what's your primary role? And eventually we got to get to how does that map out to what we're trying to achieve here through this compliance framework, testing, whatever. But if you start there, I think not only would it make people feel appreciated and like, oh, and this is a person, we have a connection here, but also you would start from a point of understanding, okay, here's the questions that I should ask you, and then here are the questions I should ask somebody else, rather than question. They're already on the defensive, like, oh, I don't know that, like, I don't feel prepared for this. This isn't my job. And the next thing you know, they're just dodging every bullet.
Yeah, they're trying to Heisman their way out of all the tackling that's about to happen. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I just never thought about it that way, where it's like, I guess as auditors and like security professionals, we end up being in a similar boat here, where it's like, we can beat people up all day over, the state or not state of their controls. But we have to understand, like, kind of, what are they actually worried about? What do they care about? We can't help them, and they can't help us if we don't care. I didn't know that the control owners are people too. I mean, I really wish someone would have told me that. I feel like that's a fact lost on a lot of security professionals. Like, the other people in the company are also people. Surprise. I mean, it's an interesting one. I think a lot of security people are under a lot of pressure, under a lot of stress, and the constraints on trying to secure and defend a company from breaches, from data loss, from unauthorized access, and everything under the sun. A lot of security people just feel like there's a new threat every 5 seconds, and they're just always behind. Slowing down may be the best thing to do, and just say, it's like, you never know if that other part of the business may be able to help you quite a bit. That'd be an interesting one. Like, what if platforms helped with that process? Where it's like the people that you have to work with on these controls, as you onboard them, you collect some of that kind of insight and perspective, where you let them kind of tell you, like, what are they worried about? What are they trying to do? Someday we'll figure that out.
Yeah, I think like a good example of that I've come across is tools that facilitate a good risk assessment process. Like, if it's good, I think it will start with the interview, right? Of find the core business owners, interview each of them about what are they concerned about. And then from there, you have your business impact analysis, right? Which tells you here are the key risks to our business, probably. You should probably have someone else take a high level look at it, from a security perspective, but that should give you most of what you need for a risk assessment. And then you just convert that into a risk register. You probably have a lot more success that way. But yeah, it totally seems like platforms can help you gather that feedback if you don't just expect that the tool robot is going to save you.
Yeah, one day they'll save us when they rule the world, so it doesn't matter. But no, I totally, I think so. I mean, you definitely, touched on something. My first role at Expedia Group was build the risk register program. Like, what's, and I guess it's easy to kind of overcomplicate what does enterprise risk management for cybersecurity look like. And Sometimes it is just as simple as like, well, you need this context. You need to go talk to business owners. You need to go kind of do the interviews before you get down to the data collection and the whole trying to, assessing the infrastructure of the company and everything else. Going straight to the technical bits, but then it's just like the question you were talking about earlier, where it's like, well, what's the scope? What is it for, and why are we worried? You can go, quote unquote, assess risk of anything, but my feedback for people and companies I've been at, it's always like, well, what is our business worried about? If we don't know what our business is worried about, we can go assess risk to data, this, that thing. We can go score all this stuff, all the tools and platforms out there, all do something, but it doesn't really mean anything if you don't know what your business is worried about. And an e-commerce business is worried about PCI data loss, and as an e-commerce business, if you're B2C, you're worried about GDPR, you're worried about CCPA, you're worried about data privacy because you're selling direct to consumers. And you build your security program around that, and then you assess your risk around that. You have some context. Otherwise, assessing risk for risk's sake, actually, I don't even think by definition, if you don't know what type of loss event you're worried about, it's just a lot of interesting conversations and a lot of data you're collecting, but to no end.
Totally.
Yeah. That's a good one. I do, but it's a process, right? And it's work, and you have to go talk to people. You have to get their time, and then you have to take time to understand it. And sometimes it doesn't happen over one coffee, but
yeah. I was gonna say, if you what you described is only a problem if you don't have unlimited resources, right? Like if we all had like a security team of 1,000 people, then you can assess every single risk, and that would be helpful. It has some value, but unfortunately, most of us don't, right? So
definitely
dial that in.
And it's like dial it in so you can assess the risk on what you can do something about, because you can't do something about everything. Otherwise, I guess you wouldn't need to know. You wouldn't need to know the relative risk. You're like, well, every risk, we're worried about all of it, any kind. Who cares? Nobody cares. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that would be
Everything's
crazy.
risky.
Everything's risky. Someone told me a long time ago, it's like, if you want to eliminate risks to, our network, just shut off the internet.
There you go.
Yeah, turn off the business. It'll be great. No more risk. Bye-bye. Yeah, then also won't have a job. So I guess that's kind of the moral of the story.
Right.
That's a good one.
So you were asking me about trending topics in compliance industry earlier. I think one of the ones I've been really curious about is, and I'm curious if you've seen this too, like on your platform or in the past, is like unified control frameworks. I think in theory, that seems like a really good idea. Like, okay, we've got 3 different compliance frameworks. I don't know, SOC 2, ISO 27001, whatever, and PCI. Let's just have one control framework and then map that out to the requirements that it needs to go to, right? Have you seen success with that in the past? And if so, what did that look like?
I think I have a lot of peers in the community who have had better success with it than I have. Yeah. That, the having a common control framework does make a lot of sense when you have a big enough security org and you have enough resources. You don't need 1,000 people, but you also can't do it with because it goes back to that question of well, what is your program and owning your controls? owning your compliance program, and to really be successful with a unified control framework, you really have to have a good point of view, because it's the getting started part. I think getting that onboarding and just building out for your company is like, these are the 50 controls that we are managing. These are the 40 controls that we are managing. And a lot of, at a really big company, the list gets really long. And then you can map it to the multiple frameworks, and then you can manage your compliance process that way. I think it's really intimidating to get started. And I think getting help with getting started, where it's like, what is the fastest way possible you can spend just enough time and resources to like get the right people together and then get it into a platform. Otherwise, you're going to be maintaining it in Excel, which, some people love Excel. That's cool. We all have Excel t-shirts and Excel merch, after a lifetime of, I don't know what job function hasn't been touched by Excel, but yeah. I think it's just like, yeah, I think those can work well. And I think it's great, and I hear from other, CISOs who that's been a big focus of their programs, because they just have so many, and like they had to invest up front to get it together and go do it.
Yeah.
And then going forward, they can manage it. It's not going to be like, and I think and if that's important to actually owning your program, I think that's what people should be considering doing. And I don't, and I think you have to ask yourself if it makes sense for your business. If your business doesn't have multiple compliance requirements for regulatory, industry, customer, then it's probably not, you have to ask yourself, is it worthwhile to go do all that? It's funny, it's a trending topic though, because I think I remember first time spending a lot of time thinking about that, both like working on the NIST cybersecurity framework back in 2013, but then also in like 2017, 2018, a lot of compliance and GRC folks were really, really trying to work on that and build out these continuous compliance and common control framework programs at different companies. And it like any other trend or kind of useful framework, it's what makes sense for your business.
Yeah.
What works for you.
Right. I think there is a point a few years ago where I discovered there was a mapping from SOC 2 to all these other frameworks, and I was like, wow, this is
mind blowing.
Cool. Like, yeah, like companies will be able to do this in a tenth of the effort, do it once and map it all out. And then, I think I had my first client that had that unified control framework. And this particular client, I don't think did invest the time needed to keep that relevant, right? And so, you ended up just having so many round, square pegs in a round hole.
Yeah.
That it was way more work to have this unified framework than if you had just said, let's do our 2 audits separately and work with those separate teams.
Yeah, no, and that's, and it takes time and it takes continuity too. I think,
True.
You have to have leadership in that, whether it's a GRC leader, whether it's a security leader, whoever is responsible is going to have to be supportive of the team to take time to go through that and make that investment. But, if they're in it for the long haul, it's something they definitely should consider. Especially if you're in health tech or fintech or something with a lot of regulatory requirements, or like say insurtech, the insurance companies are known to be very risk averse with their vendors and suppliers and who they're buying software from. So, I would, that may or may not be from firsthand experience, but, so and, on that note, Beau, it's, whether it's SOC 2 that slaps or, people actually taking time to think about like, what are they actually doing? and then and really taking time to hear from their peers about what they need help with. What are the problems they're trying to solve before you go beat them over the head about their controls and the sad state of their controls. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here today and taking the time to share about kind of your story and your experience and your wish list too. We'll make sure that somebody who can do something about it, hopefully they're listening.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I appreciate being on with you and appreciate the conversation. So thank you.
It's great. Thank you.